coming and supporting us on our first ever go. And it's quite daughter up here. I'm really impressed with the amount of people that we're waking up. Thank you so much. Basically, first thing I've got to say about Truth Juice is I'm not the original. I stumbled across this back in February, back in Wales, when I went to John Harris talk and Brian Gerrish talk. And I just fell in love with it. And not only with the information I was given, but the people that I met along the way. And I think that 50% of why we're in this room today is to network with each other, as well as to listen to Brian, but to speak to each other and to build this community. Because at the end of the day, we can't all research everything, but between us, we've researched a hell of a lot. So we need to pull on each other's resources and make the most of what we've got in this room. We're going to let Brian talk. We're going to have an interval in between. We've got tea and coffee, so it's going to be about an hour. Then we're going to have an interval, tea and coffee, stretch your legs, and we're going to finish it with what ended Brian's talk and have questions and answers as well. So, without any further ado, Brian Gerrish.
Okay, good evening everybody, and I've got to say a big thank you for Truth Juice Birmingham, because it's tremendous to see people getting together like this. I know it takes a huge effort to do, and it takes a huge effort to come out in the evening, especially when it's cold, and you're not perhaps sure what you're going to hear or whether it's going to be worth it, but I'll tell you it will be worth it tonight, not because I'm here, but because I'm looking at your faces. And I get something from it. There's stuff going on in the country, and a lot of people are starting to wake up to the fact that something isn't right, things aren't going well, and they're getting curious, and a lot of people are beginning to understand that when they read the newspapers or look at the TV, that what they're being told is not the truth. And so Truth Juice is right, because we need to re-establish what the truth is. Why do we need to do it? Because something nasty is happening, and if we don't get to grips with it, we're going to regret it. And our children are going to regret it, because they are starting to live in what is really happening at the moment. Now, I had to make a promise tonight, and that was not to frighten you. I was warned, you can come up and you can talk to them, but you mustn't frighten them. But you're all adults. So at the end of the day, I think we should just tell it as it is. And if you've got any gripes, you can speak to me afterwards. Now, the first thing to notice is I'm in a suit. And I came up in jeans and a sweater, and I'd rather have stayed in jeans and a sweater. But I have a friend called Jeffrey who's in Jersey, and he's an ex-filmmaker, and he saw the first videoed talk I did, and I had a yellow tie on. And he said, Brian, never ever wear that yellow tie again. So I said, well, okay, I'll go casual. And he said, no, you can't do that, because you're an ex-naval officer. And people watch the videos and they have an image in their mind as to what you should be. So he said, my advice to you is to stick with a suit. So I'm going to stick with a suit, but I'll just say I've got another me as well, and that's the one in the jeans and the sweater. So I'm not trying to put an image on for you, but I am trying to capture some other people. In general, beware of people in suits, because they're liars at the moment. Right, well, just before we get on to the main slides, I'm sorry this is dark, but it was taken at night. This is a demolition site, and it's immediately behind the UK column offices in Plymouth. And we've had to endure for about 2 months now a building being knocked down behind us, until last Thursday when it all went deathly quiet and we thought something's up, and they basically found an unexploded bomb on the site, so everywhere was evacuated. And we thought it was a bit excessive of the New World Order to actually put a bomb there, all planned 60 years ago. But the good news is they didn't get us, so the bomb is gone. Is this going to work? Okay. Now this is a secret, right? I'm going to tell you this, but you've got to promise not to tell anybody else. It's very important. This is the secret weapon. Okay? Do you want to know why? The reason that this chair is the secret weapon is because when you sit in it, you start to think and reflect. And I'm not advising that you sit in your armchair looking at the TV. You should turn the TV off and have a beer or a glass of wine or a cup of coffee, whatever you want. Sit in your armchair and just have a think about the world. And your common sense will tell you that something is very wrong. You know it, and if you get a quiet period of reflection, it'll come to you. What's happening, what you're being told, it's nonsense, you're being tricked, we're all being tricked. So the armchair is a secret weapon for a little bit of comfortable reflection. Now the other reason I chose an armchair is because there's been a brilliant researcher called Christopher Story, who unfortunately died about a month ago now, roughly a month. And I had the pleasure to meet him a couple of times. He's produced some brilliant books. The last one he produced was called The New Underworld Order. It's quite a thick, chunky one. But he's run a quasi-intelligence site talking about what's happening in the world. And in one of his first books that I read, and it was one of the books that tweaked me that something was going on, it was called The EU Collective Enemy of its Member States. And if you've never read that book by Christopher Story, I'd say buy it. It's heavy going, and you've got to read it twice. You read it to the main text, and then you're going to read it to the notes in the back. But when I was reading the book, at one point, Christopher Story said he was at a conference in America, and a Russian man came up to him and started to talk about what was happening in Russia. And he started to say that what the West was seeing going on in the Soviet Union wasn't the truth. There was a plan to deceive the West into believing that extreme socialism was going to fade away. And eventually Christopher Story said to this man, these people are very bad and they're very powerful, and we need to be very cautious of them. What do they fear? What are they frightened of? And I thought that's a really good question. And the answer that the Russian gave was, what these people fear is that one day, at a particular hour, somewhere very ordinary, somebody will be sitting in an armchair and they will think about what's going on and they will put the picture together. Because the moment you put the picture together, the plan, which is based on deceit, doesn't work. So the armchair there, just think about it a bit, but we're all running very busy lives and it's good to sit and reflect. But this is what the other side fear, is people like us actually breaking away from the rat race and thinking for ourselves. That makes us very dangerous. Okay, now, I've said a thanks. It started, Truth Juice Birmingham. If tonight is successful, and I hope I can get you enthused about what's going on, I hope that you're going to support the movement and you'll start a regular monthly meeting. If you do it, you'll find more people join you, and you'll find you'll learn things that you never thought you'd learn about before, and the thing will grow. And that's what we need, is more and more people. Before I do a bit on this, which is the front page of the latest UK column, I'll just say a bit about myself. I have been a suit. I went through the system. I went from school into the Navy. I went to Dartmouth, spent a year and a bit there, and then they said, would you like to go to university? I hadn't originally wanted to go to university, but I thought it sounded like a good idea. So the Navy paid me to live in London for 3 years. I hated that. It was really hard work. But basically, I then went into the Navy full-time and went through the career structure. I enjoyed 95% of it. Some of it was boring, some of it I couldn't really enjoy. But I went through the system. What did I believe? Well, I believed that basically I was there to serve my Queen and country, and I was there to defend people in Britain, and I believe that I was working with other people, officers and ranks and non-commissioned officers, who were all good people. And I spent a lot of my life in a steel box, and that was my view. But I've now learnt that basically a lot of what I was told and believed and understood was absolutely not true. And I'm now looking very closely at my Queen, because I have a sneaking suspicion that she's betrayed all of us, because she's signing away powers to govern this country. And I look at the politicians, and I'm going to discuss them further, and I've come to the conclusion I'm looking at absolute traitors. And I don't say this lightly. It's been pretty hard for me to readjust to some of it, but I'll just say to you, just because I'm here in the suit, don't think I'm going to give you the suit's view. So here's the UK column. Mike here is the main editor now. There's a story about him, but he appeared from France saying he wanted to help. He was living in the south of France in the sunshine, and he said, I really want to come to UK to get involved with what you're doing. And I said, I should think about that very carefully, because it rains a lot in Plymouth. But eventually he said he was going to come, and eventually he appeared with a wife and 2 lovely daughters. And Mike has been a real powerhouse, because not only has he got the paper looking professional, but he's also done a lot of work on websites, and he's also extremely knowledgeable about what's going on financially in this country. So a little bit later on, when we've got time for some questions, Mike is welcome to talk on what he wants to, but also he'll answer questions from you. So, this comes out of the Plymouth office. Mike and myself and the rest of them are grandmothers. And this is an interesting thing, that we got to the stage where we look at who's trying to defend the country, and a lot of them are mature people. The oldest man at the moment in Britain who's fighting, as far as I know, is a guy called Harry Beckhoff. He's 94, he's going to be 95 next year. He still works 2 mornings a week. He used to work at the Cipher station, Bletchley Park, deciphering German codes and Japanese codes in the Second World War, and he's still fighting for his country. Sometimes he gets a bit tired, but we told him he's not allowed to go until the job's finished. So if any of you have got any excuses lined up that you can't do anything because you'll get morbid or your leg hurts, I've got no sympathy, alright? So here we are, this is the front page, dark actors playing games. And we've got 2 people on here. We've got Frances Ward, and we've got this lady here who I'll come to. And the headline, you might not be able to read it, but it says, what connects Frances Ward MP, the Conservative Cabinet Office, and a middle-aged woman with an empty shopping basket? And we're pretty happy with this headline, because this paper's gone out all over the place, and a lot of copies have gone in to the heart of the Tory party, and also Labour and Mr Clegg. So what are we talking about? Well, the first thing we'll tell you about Francis Anthony Alma Maud was that other people have accused him of committing treason, because he was one of the people that was actually bullying other MPs into making agreements with the European Union, did sign a Treaty of European Union at Maastricht, and as a result, under common law in this country, he committed treason. And he committed treason because under common law, you are not allowed to sign away the rights of us to govern ourselves. It's not other people to govern us, it's us to govern ourselves. And what this man was doing with others was handing powers to unknown officials in the European Union. And I'll say, if any of you have got any doubts about what the European Union is, it is a dictatorship, and it's unbelievably dangerous. And apart from anything else, they haven't signed the accounts again this year, which is the 16th year they haven't got. So it's also a very serious criminal offence to give public money into an organisation that is itself criminal, and the European Union's criminal. So basically, Rodney Atkinson, if you've heard of him, and others reported good old Francis Maude and others for committing treason. But of course nothing much happened. And I'm going to say that in the early days a lot of people didn't understand why nothing happened. They just thought it was due to the fact that people weren't convinced about the European Union. The machine's going to go to sleep. Now, what our story was about was the lady. The lady is Julia Middleton, and she's the chief executive of Common Purpose. How many of you have heard about Common Purpose? Okay, quite a few. Well, Common Purpose is a political charity. That's impossible because you cannot be political in a charity. But they are, and what they've done is created a network of thousands of people. If you bring in school children and university graduates, they've got about 80,000 people buried amongst organisations across the country, and what they are doing is gently injecting a new political agenda. They are creating, in their own words, new leaders of society. And they are advising and encouraging people to act outside their authority. Now, if you sit in your armchair and just think about that, imagine a police officer who starts to act outside of his authority. What does he do? I'll give you an example. He hits or pushes somebody at a demonstration in London to the ground and he kills them. He shoots at somebody with a taser and he kills them. That's acting outside your authority. But this political charity, run by Julia Middleton, is encouraging people to act outside their authority. So I say this is a dangerous organisation. Now, you probably can't read it, but this is an email, and it's from Julia Middleton, and it says, "Dear Francis, I think we and quite a few Common Purpose alumni from the civil service could help with the culture change you need to bring about. Could I and David Bell, chair of Common Purpose, come and see you for 5 minutes?" And she signs it, "Love, Julia." Now, this is very interesting because either there's a bit of nookie going on, or they're very friendly, or she's overconfident in how she talks to very senior people. But she's setting up a meeting to achieve a culture change. And you ask a question, whose culture do they want to change? And why is this charity suddenly working with the heart of the Tory party? Because Common Purpose was traditionally linked with Tony Blair and Prescott. So all of a sudden we've got a change of politicians, a change of colour from red to blue, but Common Purpose, which is an extreme socialist organisation, is working with Francis Maude. Well, one of the team out there, and I'm going to say not my team, a good guy from the general public, did some work and he discovered that there was a leadership committee being run, connected with the Cabinet Office. And when he asked for some documents, at the end of one of the meetings it said they were looking to engage Common Purpose. And that was to achieve a culture change. Now, at the time we published the story, we knew that the contract had been let. And so somebody asked for the Tory party to release more information about what this was all about and how much they were spending to achieve a culture change. And quick as a flash, what happened? They didn't want to release the information. Now this is interesting because Francis Maude is chairman of the Tories Transparency Committee. He's made the pledge to us that we are the auditors of what's going on in society, and any sum over £500 spent by the public authorities, your local authorities, Birmingham City Council, you have a right to see the invoices. That's law, actually. So he believes in transparency, except when we asked to see what was going on with Common Purpose, and all of a sudden all the doors got shut. Now, they are
several days over the legal limit for releasing the information, so we are now waiting. But I'm telling you that what's going on in the background is exactly the same politics as was going on with Tony Blair and Gordon Brown and Mandelson. The fact that the colours changed to blue, and we've got Davy Cameron, the Cabbage Patch, if you look at the back of the UK column, and we've got George Osborne, and we've got Francis Maud. These people are using the same politics, but they're prepared to lie to us. So they're saying they're one thing, they're achieving a change, they're going back to conservative values, but I'm going to tell you they're absolute liars. And I'm very happy to say that on film, because we can prove they're liars. So that was what our article was about. Do read it. Now this is a bit more on Julia Middleton, because she wrote a book which was called Beyond Authority. I've mentioned this several times, because if you want to know what's in somebody's mind, read the book. And if you go and read this book, you will find she uses very interesting terminology. She believes in useful idiots. And who are they? Us. We are the useful idiots. If she reckons that you're bright, or you're professional, or you've got some special knowledge or skills, then you are classed as an expert idiot. But you're still an idiot because she thinks you can be used to achieve her political agenda. And remember that this woman is the chief executive of a charity, and you're not allowed to be political. So there's deceit going on, but we can now show that it's going on at the heart of the Tory government. She talks about building coalitions. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because we now got Cameron in bed with Clegg. Sorry, that's bad terminology, but you get what I'm meaning. So we've got a coalition, and if they force through the voting reform, we are not going to be able to get this coalition out of power. That's a dictatorship. So this woman thinks that that's the way we should go. But look at this word, conspiracy. The thing which people are always hammering, it's conspiracy theory. This is a twist, because a conspiracy is actually a criminal act. These people add the theory to try and undermine it, which is why I say I don't deal in theory, I only deal in fact from documents. She believes on getting a fifth column inside. That's deceit, that's revolution, that's overturning things. It's charity, you pay for this woman, and since about 1985, the general public in the UK has put £100 million into this charity. If you start to challenge, this is what she thinks should happen. You're going to be run over. They're going to undermine you or discredit you. And how do they discredit you? I'll tell you how it's done. Letters appear in your local area saying that you're a bit of a nutter. So in the early days, when I was starting to get very interested in a lot of public money going missing, what started to happen is letters and little gossipy things were sent around people that I knew. And it was spread that I was not well, but actually I felt very well and I knew what I could see. So undermining people, particularly by trying to hint that they're mentally unstable, is a key tactic of the other side, and I can tell you it's a key tactic of the Soviets. So this woman, in my opinion, very dangerous. Now this is just a bit on common purpose. This word here, ponerology, which just means the study of evil. Now, I just take things to one level, and I've been told not to scare you. So if you say to me, what are we fighting? I will tell you, we're fighting evil. And it's evil on a scale that we're not used to seeing in this country. If you go and talk to people who lived in East Germany, where people were removed from their houses in the early hours, tortured and dumped on the streets, or you talk to people who lived in the Soviet Union, where people were picked up in the black cars and found shot. And if you want to know what's really been going on in Russia, you should do a little bit of research into the journalists who started to report on Glasnost. so-called change from communism to capitalism, which is an absolute lie because they're both the same. But if you check on those journalists, they're all dead or missing. That's a fact. So this organisation is basically elitist, it's dishonest, it doesn't have a conscience, it's egocentric, and it makes people fearful. And if you dissent, you become a dangerous extremist. Now, one of the things I'll talk about a bit later is Mr. Rumpumpy, who you may have heard, but he believes that if you challenge people, you're dangerous. So everything's getting turned on its head. We are useful idiots, and we're going to be socially re-engineered. Children are ideological assets. And if you've got children at school, my advice to you is to get into that school and see what they're actually being taught. Don't accept what they tell you. Have a look at the books, have a look at the textbooks, and you will start to see that children are being taught stuff which I think most of you will be horrified at. One of the subjects coming along is eugenics, selective breeding. I'm not making this up, it's all starting to come in through the school agendas. And this is because every child matters. Have you heard that saying? Now most of you have seen it on little government brochures and you think that's a warm, cuddly feeling. But it's not. Every child matters, because if you can brainwash every child, you automatically assume the transformation into the new state. This is standard extreme communist or fascist mentality. And this is why everything we're seeing at the moment is to do with children. Common purpose attracts psychopaths, people who don't really care about ordinary people because they're elitists. They're the suits. They're the people who are now chief executives of local authorities earning £250,000 a year. So they have no concept of what it's like for somebody to live on a £4,000 a year pension. Why do they pay them £250,000? Because the moment you're feeding off that sort of money, they own your arse, basically. They own you, because you are not going to get another job. We know Common Purpose selects and recruits what they call the right people, and we know that the right people are people who can be adapted to their way of thinking. This is not wacko stuff. All the documentation's either on my site, CP Exposed, or you can have a look on Stop CP, and we know how they're doing it because they're using NLP. Is anybody here trained in NLP? Doesn't matter if you are, because NLP is a form of hypnosis, and it can be used for good or it can be used for bad. And the reason that I've got to know about what it is because NLP trained people contacted me to say, Brian, what you're describing is as a result of people having their brains slightly reframed. And I have one particular gentleman who's very worried because as an NLP practitioner, he's seeing NLP being used for political purposes. If I was good at NLP, and I'm not, I would be able to work on you as an audience. And when you left this room, you would have ideas in your mind that you weren't even aware those ideas got into your heads. Don't believe me, go and research it for yourself. If you go on the internet, you will find hundreds and thousands of consultancies offering to change the way people think and behave. The catch is, if it's done with a bad intent, you can suffer from it, and I'll come on to that a bit later. So Common Purpose, I'm just warning, we can prove now is operating at the heart of the Tory government, and this is the same Common Purpose that was working alongside Tony Blair. I promised I wouldn't dwell on this, and I'm not going to. But if you talk about how to control people, and you look through history, how do you control people, aside from beating them with a big stick? What do you have to do to them? Pardon? Well, you can make them afraid, yeah, absolutely. But you can come in another angle. You can buy them. You can pay them £250,000, and the moment the salary's running, they'll do everything you say. You can offer them drugs. You can offer them women. You can be got with a gigolo. And then we have the fact that we have MPs who've been caught using rent boys. All this is acceptable now. We can be in public life and we can be doing a bit of something a bit dirty, a bit coke sniffing on the sideline and a few women and oh dear, and then it goes to boys. And then it goes to young girls. And what I'm getting at is if you look at how you actually control people if you're a nasty piece of work, most things go now. You can even be involved in orgies, and if you look at most cities in this country, and you may be shocked if I tell you to do it, but go on the internet and put swingers in, and you will discover in every major city in this country there are clubs where people go for orgies, go to swap partners. This has supposedly become the norm. And if that's the norm, what are you left with to control people? What is not acceptable? Paedophilia. So paedophilia is on the rise because it's being deliberately encouraged, because the moment you join that club, you are in big trouble. You are an outlaw for society and the bad boys can control you. And it is not something that's done by dirty old men, just dirty old men in raincoats. It's right the way through the spectrum. And the people who advise me, or ex-police, say in this world, the first thing to know is that it's roughly 50-50 men and women. So if the ladies are here thinking this is a subject that only men get involved in, that's completely wrong. And the next thing is, it doesn't matter whether you're a judge or you sweep the roads. If you're involved in this game, you are the best of friends and you will lie and cover up for each other. Now this man is called Matthew Byrne. He was a Common Purpose Advisory Board member in Liverpool. And that meant that he was one of their chosen selected leaders. He was a role model. And he met with other people behind closed doors to choose other common purpose people. What sort of people do you think this man might like to choose? I think he might like to choose people who had his own little perversions. We can't be sure because we don't know. But basically, the fact that he was also common purpose has never come out in the national press. Although we did publish a little embarrassing picture, which is David Cameron, Michael Heseltine, standing next to this man because he was a pillar of society. It's a very strange thing, but everybody who's digging into what's going on, whether it's Ian Brain or David Icke or myself or other people, doesn't matter what direction you go in, you come back to this nasty little direction. And the only conclusion we can come to is because the people at the top, in control, are absolutely rotten. I'm not going to do any more because I'm being watched carefully. I'm looking at your faces. But I will answer questions on it. Well, here he is. And of course we got Gordon Brown. Do you remember him? He disappeared after the election, didn't he? He went very quiet. I don't know whether it's true, but we were told he went for a little rest in the clinic. I'll let you think about that. He went for a little rest because his brain was needing a rest. So here he was. He'd been our Prime Minister. He's lied, sold us down the river, and here he is shaking hands with Mr. Von Rumpy. And this is the man who says that the nation state is over. He's quoted in the paper as saying, that's it, we can't exist in this world as a nation state. The only way we can exist is by going into supranational power blocks. Well, we might say he's misguided, but the key bit with this guy is that he says that anybody that dares challenge this view is a dissenter. And in fact, if you then couple it in with other things that the European Union is saying, if you challenge the European Union, you're actually to be put as a terrorist. Now this is very, very dangerous stuff. because what's going on in the country now is very close to the fact that if you are deemed as a terrorist, and that only takes a couple of people, you can be picked up. The van arrives. So this man is very dangerous, and here he is cuddling Gordon Brown, and of course Cameron is also cuddling up to him. So we need to be very, very wary about what our leaders are doing. Somebody did this little comparison. It's the ears that did it, but they look alike apparently. But we've got to get a bit of humour in. It's the best I can do at the moment, okay? So this was the main bit. It's all over, he said, and he said it in Berlin, seat of many interesting debates on how to manage people. It's never properly reported in the paper. Now this is not conspiracy, this is fact. If you look into what the socialists say, who's a socialist? Well, Russia as the Soviet Union was a socialist country, because they don't call themselves communists, they call themselves socialists. Who knows of the Fabian organisation in this country? Well, there's an organisation called the Fabians. Many, many politicians of all parties are involved. And if you look at what the Fabians want, they want a world socialist state. But their logo is a wolf in sheep's clothing, because they don't believe in doing it openly. They believe in doing it by a creeping change in what's happening in the country. So they're deceitful. But this is exactly what socialists believe. You're going to destroy the nation state. You destroy history, because when children don't actually know anything about their history and culture, the country is already starting to crumble. And that's happening in schools at the moment. You've got to destroy the family, because the family is the strong unit. So you don't want mum and dad together, you want them apart. And that's why social services at the moment are doing everything they can to break up families. I'm not saying everybody in social services is bad, I'm not saying every policeman is bad, I'm talking about people within the establishment. They're taking the children, and I've done talks on this, and I can tell you that at the moment we can't cope with the cases being reported into the newspaper every week, where mums and dads are talking about children being taken away from them on totally falsified evidence. And when they turn for help, whether they go to a solicitor or a barrister, they don't get any help, they get the opposite. They discover that the legal teams are working behind their backs to prolong the agony. Why would they do that? Money. Right? Taking children, social services, rough calculation is worth 20 billion a year in legal fees. 20 billion. So there's something very nasty starting to feed on families and the children. They want to get rid of faith. How many here would say they've got faith? I'm going to put my hand up. And this is interesting. If you watch what's going on at the moment, anything to do with Christianity is being challenged. I'm going to come in from that angle. And the reason for that is that if you can get rid of any form of spiritual faith, you just rely on people living in the here and now. They're just worried about pleasure on this earth, because there's nothing better coming. And it doesn't matter whether you speak to Muslims, because they understand what I'm speaking about at the moment, but the establishment wants to destroy faith. And if any of you are getting excited about the rise of the one world church, if you dig into it, pardon?
I said don't be.
Don't be, because the one world...
about it, don't be.
The one world church is actually a false church, and if you do your research you'll find that it's actually satanic. If you do your research on the UN, you will find that it's based on satanic stuff.
It's also predicted in Revelation, the last of the Bibles.
Correct. They're going to get rid of real leaders, so if you stick your head above the parapet, you're in danger. But I'm going to say to you, don't take any notice of that, because there's a lot of leaders out there and we're doing very well. We've got a police state coming. Have you all seen the cameras? See the way the police behave? Very aggressive now. not sir and madam, and what can we do to help? What are you doing? Who are you? Where's your ID? These are very aggressive people. It's not because they're bad people, it's because they've been trained that way. We know that psychiatrists are being used to abuse people. So people in the care system or the prison system who have problems are now being psychiatrically assessed, and then they're being prescribed psychotropic drugs to shut them up. In America, the kids in schools are being given questionnaires, and if they fill in the wrong answers, they're prescribed psychotropic drugs. And if the parents try and intervene, the parents are bound up in prison. That's a fact. It's also a fact that the same system is started to be implemented in this country. And if you don't believe me, you do the research on the schools. We talked in Bristol on Saturday, and at a particular point, the policeman at the back shouted out and said, "I'm an ex-policeman, I served 30 years, and I can tell you at the moment there are camps being set up, and I can tell you that air bases," and he mentioned RAF Lynham, which is being decommissioned for RAF use, has now got some 600 what are called NATO troops in it. They're not so the European Union. And why are there foreign troops coming into this country? Because if there's violence on the street, you want to use foreign troops because they've got no sympathy. They don't care whether you're British, because they're foreign.
Have you found out a list of these camps that are finished now?
This is part of our job, and that's why you're here tonight. Fear, oppression, propaganda, political elite. Do you remember Mr. Cameron's recent announcement about a 50-year contract with the French over armed forces? Was it debated in Parliament? So this man suddenly pops up on BBC and says, "I've signed away the armed forces for 50 years. This man is dangerous. This is a dictatorship. The state as an employer. Now, we've already got about 45% of workers employed by the state, but have you seen somewhere in the Midlands, it wasn't Birmingham, but there's a local authority has decided it'd be a good idea to sack people because it costs them too much under their existing rates, and they're going to re-employ people who've been on benefits, because under the new Tory scheme they can employ them at roughly £1 an hour. This is communism, socialism. It's all there in the paper when you look at it. Now this is in the background, the Fixated Threat Assessment Centre. This is up in London. It's a few policemen in a fairly grotty building with psychiatrists, and if somebody causes a problem, they can come and section you. And a man contacted us some months ago and said he'd received a letter from his GP asking him to go and see his GP. So he went in to see his doctor, and the doctor looked a bit embarrassed and said, "Well, the thing is, Mr. X, I've been asked to see you by the Home Office." And the bloke said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, I've been asked to see you by the Home Office in order to sort of evaluate whether you're okay." And he said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, basically they want me to comment on your mental health." Shall I tell you what Mr. X had done? He'd sent a series of emails to Harriet Harman complaining about what she was doing. And she was so frightened of him that she got the Fixated Threat Assessment Centre to start the process to getting him sectioned. This is real, what's going on in this country. If I go back to the early 80s, when I was starting to do various forms of training in the Navy, this is what I read about the Soviet Union and East Germany. And now we've got the same thing happening in this country. And I'm going to let you into a secret. It's because communism and fascism don't exist. They're the same form of control by the international banks. So if you mix socialism and fascism and capitalism, and you get something fairly close to a thing called communitarianism, or Gramscian fascism, I'm reading it all off, but you can have a look on the internet, you'll find that the systems are all the same. They're all based on money. So I was lied to, but I managed to put some of the pieces together. We know what's going to happen with treatment, torture, psychotic drugging and electroshock therapy. There's a guy in Ireland who talks to us. He had both his children taken away, and he fought so hard for those children he was put in a psychiatric unit, and he has experienced electroshock treatment without any anaesthetic. I'm not frightening you because we're going to deal with it, but we have to actually understand what is going on because it's unbelievably serious. Now, how can I prove some of this is going on? This is a fax that a lady got. I think it was dated about 1996, but it still applies because there is an all-parliamentary group on world governance. So when your MP sits in their office and are smug and cocky, and the only people they're working for are Labour or the Tory party or the Lib Dems, that's a lie, because in Parliament there are well-established groups which are pushing across MPs to create a one world government. So they can't manage the country, they can't manage the National Health Service, they can't run the police, but they're already planning to run the world. These are dangerous people, and we need to get them exposed. This is 2 leaflets from Christopher Story's book on the EU Collective, and these were the 2 pages that really triggered me as to what was going on in the country, because they were in the beginning of the book. And there were 2 tables, and the bit at the bottom says that this information came from Soviet defectors, and I believe that this is true. Excuse me. And what you've got down the left-hand side is parts of society: religion, education, media, and down here you've got family. And then they're saying what's going to be done, and then we've got the result. This is the family. What we're going to do to the family is break it up. Now, from the top down to here was labelled as destabilisation. How many of you can surf? We're a bit too far inland. I come from Plymouth and Cornwall. This has failed badly, Mike. You should have warned me about this. Nobody surfed here.
The internet. Yeah.
Oh, this is incredible.
I have surfed down to Gerrish.
Right. Okay, well done, sir, because we're going to come on to surfing, and it's all down to you, as you'll see. Yeah, okay, right, excellent. Never talk about surfing in Birmingham. So this is a plan to demoralise the country, or a democracy, and then when you've demoralised it, you start to destabilise it. That's really to get into the nasty stuff. So what did we see happening up in London? Riots. And we've seen riots before. In my opinion, these are not riots which are created by ordinary people running amok after a few beers. My professional opinion, if I'm allowed to tell you this, is these are professionally agitated by members of our own government. And if you know David Shaler, who's had a little bit of bad press from time to time, but David Shaler was MI5, never mind what's happened to him since. And what he said in the early days is far from protecting the British public. The British public need protection from our security services. And I think he was spot on. So we know that at the moment there is a plan for violence on the streets. Subject, Islam. And this came up in Bristol, and we had some quite heated debate with a couple of members in the audience. And what I'm going to tell you is that the powers that be want violence on the streets with the Muslims. Why do they want that? Because the moment there is major violence between whites and blacks, or Muslims and Christians, they can enact the Civil Contingencies Act, and that puts us into a police state. Now, many years ago, 4 years ago, I met a man called Dr. Mohammed Nazim, who's the chairman of Birmingham Central Mosque. He can't surf either, I don't think. And I had an interesting chat with him. And at one point I said to him, yes, but Mohammed, what about the British Muslim Council? What I was implying was that the British Muslim Council was suggesting things which weren't necessarily nice or right. And he looked at me and smiled and said, Brian, what makes you think the British Muslim Council is anything to do with the Muslims? And I said, well, maybe the name. And he said, well, maybe the name, but look at who appoints the people. And what he then explained to me was that we were seeing the government appointing people into positions. And this really got me thinking, because I then began to see that the deceit was acting right the way through the community. And he also told me something else. He said, we have a problem because within the Muslim community there are some very bad people. But we keep trying to report them. We try and report them to the local authority, we try and report them to the police, we try and report them to special branch, but nothing happens. In fact, we get brushed off. And he said, I can't understand this. And I said, I can. Because what's happening is the establishment is trying to keep those people pinned against you. They want the troublemakers there, because then we can move forward. And I did something controversial, because I was invited to speak in Birmingham Central Mosque, and it was a fantastic experience. And I believe if I ask nicely, I may get another opportunity. It's open to the public, so hopefully we can have a mixed audience. And I hope Dr. Nazim, if he listens to this before I telephone him, won't shoot me. But basically, there are lies being told. Now, things are happening in the country. I've talked to BNP audiences, I've mentioned it now on camera, and I will talk to all reasonable people, groups. And basically, what I said is, where did these people come from? Did they fight their way ashore? Or did they? They didn't. They were invited into this country. Who invited them? The British government. So we've got people in UK now from all over the world. They are very good people. They were invited here. It's just that we were never asked. So what I'd like to push across to you very strongly is your enemy is not the groups, be they Lithuanians or Muslims or Chinese or Africans. Your enemies are your own politicians, because they have deceived us. But the goal is violence on the streets. This is the same plan with more detail, but at the end they want basically major chaos and a clampdown. And when that happens, you are normalised. Interesting word. Do you know what normalised means? You've become normal people. That means you've become a socialist, you've become a communist. Now, none of this is magic to me, because in my military training we were taught this. But when I sat in my armchair one day, I suddenly thought, oh my God, I'm looking at the plan unfolding in this country. And that's what Christopher Story sees. That's what Alex Jones sees. That's what Ike sees. And many, many other people. So we're talking some heavy stuff. Where are you? There's some worried looks over there, so I'll bring it up in a minute. But this is the con. We're at the bottom of the pile. And we are the cattle. I'm using that word deliberately, because that's the mentality of the people we're up against. This is what we think we've got. Oh, sorry. Oh, read that. Let me just go up there. We think that these people are looking after us. And so when we have a problem, we go and see our councillor, we go and see the MP. And if there's a really nasty problem, like children being sold, there's a big debate in Parliament. Is there? No. Because basically this system has all been pushed out of the way. But it's been done in a very devious manner. Come on. And this is the cause. Change agents. Now I use this term, but I've now found it in other people's books. And this is one of them as an example called Demos. It's Marxist based, because you can look at the people who created it. Julian Middleton's been very well connected with Demos, so's George Osborne. Tory, but he's connected with a extreme socialist organisation. And then there's a whole heap of other ones, too many to talk about. Tavistock Institute, Bilderbergers, Demos, Royal Institute of International Affairs. Most of you maybe have never heard of these, but if you start digging, go into Google, bung some of them in, you will find all sorts of organisations that you've no idea what they do. But I'll tell you what they do. They plot and plan. And what they are bringing together is a plan to do something very nasty in this country. Now I've got in the middle BBC, I've got Oxford University, and I've got Cambridge. Because in my opinion, the BBC is now utterly a propaganda machine. And if you look at the evening news, there's no substance. Do you remember when Tony Blair brought his book out? And he went over to Dublin, didn't he, for the signing, or was it the first signing in here in London? And I thought I was watching a sort of, midweek programme discussing writers. There was no other news, there was only Tony Blair. This is pure propaganda. And I can tell you the BBC's riddled with common purpose. So what the Labour government has done, and what the Tories are continuing, is they've created a cuckoo. Just imagine a cuckoo growing in the nest, getting bigger and bigger. The third sector, the public sector, the charity sector. And they created this. Now, if you go back and you talk to your grandparents about the Second World War, we managed to run a war with very, very few bodies actually controlling us. You probably had a town council, a city council. Now we've got 1,300 government departments. And if it's confusing, it's supposed to be, because that's the smoke screen that people can be deceived. And this is the other key bit. 170,000 charities. How many of you give to charity? I do, but I'm very, very careful in who I give to, because the overwhelming majority of charities are in fact businesses. And the only money they get is from the taxpayer, straight from the government. And I am very, very cautious about major charities like the NSPCC and Bernardo's, because both those two charities have been given political views to the government. I think they're there for a very different reason to what the average person thinks. Because if you're a true socialist, you believe it's okay to use anything to promote your cause. Charities, the churches, kiddies groups, teachers, parent-teachers association, everything is okay. And that's the value of our charities, 44 billion. Now this figure, when I discovered it, amazed me, because you look around the country and you say, well, we should have a wonderful country. If there's £44 billion floating around to buy people food and clothes and make sure they've got a house to live in, we shouldn't have any problem. So why have we got a problem? Well, the answer is because when you dig into the accounts, most of this money goes in organisation and pay. Why do you want the people on big salaries? Because if they're on big salaries, they can be controlled. Julia Middleton earns about £90,000 a year, so she's not in the real world. Now what happens is these people have their secret meetings, they produce an agenda, they inject it in here, they then inject it across into the government. So when your MP says, I decided, we decide, no, he didn't, he was told. He was told what was going to happen. And all the shit drops on us. Now imagine this mess, and then across the top of it you put a charity that selects its own people to go in hospitals and schools and police to run their own political agenda. And these people talk to each other and they decide what is to be done. All of a sudden, these people are powerless. Anybody here a local councillor? It's not unusual because the average local councillor is totally out of contact with what's going on. But if you talk to local councillors, they will tell you they're now becoming powerless because in the council it's the officers, the paid employees, that make all the decisions. And that is the whole point of this big mess. It's taking power from these people.
My local councillor told me that it's just a handful of people called
Correct.
so just like cabinet ministers.
Yeah.
And the other 60, 70 of them, they're useless. They're just errand boys.
This is a very key point, because inside Birmingham City Council you will find there's a cabinet, just the same as the government, and there will be about 9, maybe 10 people who control all the major decisions. Now you imagine you get 10 people to control all the major decisions, and you send in a nasty little organisation to control 4 of the 10 people. All of a sudden, somebody rather different than the council is controlling things. Now, how many of you like Tony Blair? Fixated on. How many of you like David Cameron? No? I like you guys. So,
Of the condemned party.
even though you can't surf, I can't surf either, so I'm going to make a big issue. He is, yeah. Well, this is what he's been spouting, the big society. And this is an absolute con, because the big society is a continuation of Blair's third way, the third sector. So all the Tories are doing now is continuing the pushing away of the democratic system and the replacing it with this lot, which is why Cameron can suddenly appear on TV saying, "Oh, I've just signed away the armed forces to the French." Now this is the level that we've got to in the country, and it's now speeding up, so we've got to do a few things very quickly. I'm watching the time, we just do 5 minutes and I'll pause for a bit. So here were the student protests. Don't anybody go up? I was really pleased that the students got out on the streets. I wasn't pleased with the violence, but I'd begun to wonder whether all our students had gone to sleep with their Game Boys and their Wiis and their, what's the other thing that's in there? Can't think what it's called. Connect, okay. So I thought all the young people had finally switched off on beer and computers, but amazing, isn't it? Somebody switched their money off, effectively, and now they're beginning to wake up. And my prediction is we're going to see a lot more younger people come to meetings like this, because they realise now they're going to leave university with a ton of debt around their necks. So, student riots. What's this got to do with it? What is this? It's not mine. Yeah, it's close. It's very close. Have you heard of a guy called Deripaska?
Yeah, Oleg Deripaska.
Yeah, Russian oligarch. Now, somebody would say that maybe when the Berlin Wall came down, that all of the Russian bad guys suddenly became good. I watched with amazement as the BBC told me that the Berlin Wall coming down was the end of communism, because up until the 9 o'clock news that I watched, I was dealing with intelligence material and reports which said that not only was socialism and communism alive and well, but they were reorganising. They were ditching all their old military equipment and they were re-equipping with new. They were also redeploying. But the BBC was absolutely full of rubbish. And the next day the papers were all full of that's the end of communism. But all the stuff I was reading and other military people said that they were still a major threat. And people who were doing analysis were still looking at documents which were Soviet. They were still stamped with the Soviet. And that is because glasnost is a deception. It's designed to fool us into thinking that the socialist system has gone away. So when I start to see European documents talking about a European Union from the Urals to the Atlantic, and also including Africa, by the way, we've got something very nasty coming. I hope I'm not frightening you, but we've got to talk about it. So here's Millbank Tower, where the students went, and we discovered this, that it's owned by Reuben Brothers, who are supporters of the Russian oligarch Deripaska, and they've also given 200,000 to the Conservatives. So who's running the Tory party? Good old-fashioned tweed-jacketed Tories, or are we looking at something different? And I'm going to say to you, the evidence is that it's something very different, because we've got people who are amongst international criminals. I'm going to end there, just for a break, and we'll carry on. But if there are any questions at the moment, I'll take them. A stunned silence, because I've shocked you all. Yeah.
To the Freedom of Information Act, we're talking about our local councils. Do you know how much money is going to Europe as a percentage?
We do, because we know it nationally, and therefore you can work it out. But there are a lot of people who are now asking their own councils to declare how much is going to Europe. And of course the local councils and authority don't like releasing that information, because since it's now been published in the papers that the European accounts haven't been audited or signed off for the 16th year, for Birmingham City Council to admit it's giving money to an organisation that doesn't audit its accounts means that I believe the correct term is malfeasance in public office is being committed, which is a criminal offence. So, pardon?
It's a treasonous offence to support.
A foreign power as well. Yeah.
And also to financial support.
Yeah. Well, the key point is that money, our money, is being given away to an organisation which is a foreign power and is also criminal. We know it's criminal. So that means that your Birmingham City councils and councillors who are involved are also committing a criminal act. And it's a good thing to write to them, because they're not used to people saying, why are you committing a criminal act? If you do this, I'll come to you, if you do this, you'll start to see them go rather pale around the gills and they get a bit squeamish. And this is one of the key things of using the language. If you know what's going on, you know it's treason, you know it's criminal, that's the language you use. And all of a sudden you'll start to see people recoil, because they've been living a life in a building on big salaries and nobody bothers them. So the freedom of information is important. Yeah.
The figures that I've read suggest that it's like £200 of every £1,000 of council tax collected. It's like about 20%.
Yeah.
If you spread that around the country, it's over 20%.
Well, something else we're going to come on to is what to do with it, and the fact that actually the collecting of these taxes is unlawful anyway. This is now starting to come out by the other people digging. And John Harris, his initial work where he started to be able to demonstrate the people that the organisations we think are public bodies for our benefit are in fact profit-making organisations. That's pretty amazing. I'll come to you here. Just a little story. I got home from a meeting locally in Plymouth one evening at about midnight, 5 past midnight. And as I was parking my car, a police patrol car sort of pulled up alongside me. Window came down. There was only one policeman in it, and he said, "Good evening, sir. Can I ask where you've been?" And I said, "Well, I've been to a meeting." And he said, can you tell me where the road goes to that you came down? And I said, it goes to a place called Lee Mill. And he said, do you normally park your car here? And I said, yes. And he said, what's your name? And I had this vision of John Harris in my head. And I said, Brian. My name's Brian. I didn't give him any more, see what would happen. Sort of halfway measure. And he said, so you live here? And you normally park your car here? And I said, yes. And I thought, well, he's checked out that I've been drinking, which I haven't. So I said, can I ask you some questions? And he said, yeah. So I said, are you aware that the Association of Chief Police Officers is a private profit-making company? Now listen to his answer. He said to me, have they done that already? Have they done that already? He knew something about it. And I said, yes, they have. And then I asked him some other questions. about what was happening in the police. And eventually he said to me, I'll tell you, I'll just follow, you know. He said to me, I've got 3 more years to go. And he said, let me tell you, I'm out. Because there's stuff going on in the police I don't like. It's really bad, and I've got the opportunity to get out. And I said to him, well, I'd rather you didn't get out. And he said, why is that? And I said, because we need good people like you inside the police force to sort it out. And he said, I hadn't looked at it that way, but I'm going to say to you, this is a very important way to look at it, because we shouldn't dismiss any organisation because of the bad people. What we've got to do is use a bit of truth juice to wake up the good people. I then said to him, I've got a present for you, and I opened the boot of the car, and I gave him about 50 UK columns, and I sent him on his way. Now, I still don't know why that guy was there, because he was in a big sort of M4, M6 police car, one of the big, very fast estates, and we never ever see those in our area. So did he come to visit me? Was he sent? I don't know, but I had a very interesting conversation with him. So that was a little insight that the good people are out there, and we've got to wheedle them out of the system, and I'm going to stop there. Okay.
Hello everybody. There's tea and coffee available at the back, and as far as I'm concerned, this is the most important bit, so all make the best of the opportunity you've got in this room.
Okay, you alright? How many of you smoke? Okay. I don't smoke, but I'll tell you that I believe that the stopping of smoking is about social control. It's not about your health. And the next step is that, you know, if you're there in the doorway outside the building, you become a social outcast. And then you can be branded as a non-person. So personally, I stand up to smokers. It's got nothing to do with that. My wife smokes as well. But you watch it and you see the anti-smoking policy. This was actually started in Germany in about 1936, and they were trying to force through no smoking policy in Nazi Germany. But I think once the bullets began to fly, people were dragging on their ciggies. But anyway, this is not the facts for this lot, because you know what that's about. And all I wanted to do is, this picture appeared with Cameron, here he is, Toff, and this is Boris, he's another Toff, and Nat Rothschild's in there and a few other people, that these are the golden boys. We're told that these are the leaders that have risen and deserve the job and the respect, but if you do your homework on them, they've actually been pampered. And there was a bit in the paper where Heseltine said that when Davy Cameron was a little boy, we used to call him Prime Minister. And most people didn't take much notice of that, but I'm very sure, Mike certainly believes it, that what he was saying was that Cameron was groomed to become Prime Minister, and therefore he's telling you that there isn't a democratic system, because it's all about moving people into position. So these are a load of little toffs, and they don't run the country because their little bottoms are owned by the bankers. And everything comes back to money and the international bankers. And so we can drop away the labels of socialist and fascist or communist or whatever it is, because it comes down to a banking conspiracy. And my research, and obviously reading people who've been researching stuff and writing stuff a lot longer than I've been around, I've come to agree with their research, which is that we're dealing with a bunch of criminals established in the City of London, and if we understand those people, we can then see how these people are controlled. Now this annoys me intensely, but when I joined the Navy, you get security vetted, and depending on what bits of job you're going to do, you go through levels of what they call vetting. And they ask intensely personal questions about you. They want to know whether you've ever tried drugs, or whether you've ever committed adultery, or whether you've ever stolen anything. And what they're looking for is stuff that you might have done that could then be used against you for blackmail. And yet we've got these people, and this is Mr. Deripaska in the middle, we've got our politicians mixing with people. I can't say on camera this man is, but we know that we are basically looking at a criminal elite. These people are doing what they like across the world with money, and here are key politicians, but look who the friends are. They're supposed to be opposites. We've got Mandy, who's in the red corner, and we've got George Osborne, who's supposed to be in the blue. It's absolute nonsense. They're all working for the same side. And then we've got the trio over here. So here's Osborne, Paraskeva, and here's Nat Rothschild. If you watched Tony Blair when he was in power in particular, the whole time he had bankers around him. Rothschild, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Lehman Brothers. There's an interesting bank because they went bust. But according to Julia Middleton, Lehman Brothers directors and officers were an ideal role model for children. That's in her book, she's praising them. She also thinks that East German bankers were really good people. And this woman is running courses for school children. Why? Because all these people are part of the same pot. What's MI5 doing? Well, I don't believe MI5 is doing anything to protect us at the moment. And the clue to it is that if you go back into the Second World War, you find that a certain gentleman was head of British intelligence. Anybody give me a name? Victor Rothschild. Victor Rothschild. So if you start to look at books like Spycatcher, when people were warning that there had been penetration into our society by extreme socialists, no action was taken. Yeah? So my opinion at the moment is that we've got a big problem because the people should be protecting us are doing nothing of the sort. Some things hit the paper, but who owns the papers? You go through the system, it's the Murdochs who is funding them. You come to exactly the same class of people. We're coming to a criminal elite. This probably says it all, but that's a bit of a scam because somebody photoshopped it, but it looks good and we got the point. This one's interesting. This is George Osborne, and this is a Demos meeting. But Demos is a Marxist think tank, so what is a Tory person in charge of the bank balance doing there? And this one, do you know who he is? Balls. Yeah, it's so appropriate. Well, what's special about Mr. Balls? What party is he a member of? Labour Party. Labour Party is a socialist party, isn't it? Except, slightly out of order, I'll just jump over this one. Except that Balls is a member of the Bilderbergers. How many of you have heard of the Bilderbergers? Right, elite club started after the Second World War by the Nazis. Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands was the first chairman, and they meet every year and decide policy for the world. And we've got Balls attending their meetings, and this is a letter where he had to admit it. And also we've got the fact that he charged his travel to the public purse, which he's not supposed to do. So when you start to pull apart the political system, it is complete lies. The whole thing is balls, a lot of it. Yeah. So jump back, because who have we got here? We've got a girl in the long hair, girl with the long hair. Kenneth Clark. Now what's this man's claim to fame at the moment?
Hypocrisy.
Pardon?
Hypocrisy.
Hypocrisy. No, I agree with that. Well, this is the man in charge of our justice system.
Just us.
There isn't justice. I've been in court over the last few months about 6, maybe 7 times. I've been in court with Anne and Holly Gregg and Robert Green, and I've been in court with some other mothers who had their children taken away from them. And what I have seen and experienced for myself for the first time is just appalling. Hearsay evidence being produced as real evidence, documents lost, documents falsified. It's just incredible. And why? Because the judiciary are corrupted. And they are corrupted on money. And that figure of 20 billion for playing around with family cases is a clue to it. And this joker is put in charge of it. And aside from the corruption, what he's doing is taking away trial by jury, habeas corpus, and he's replacing it with the European system of corpus juris, which means it's only a judge who judges you. Now we know enough, and credit where it's due, because John Harris started the trail for seeing the courts were being run as profit-making organisations. We then had Albert Burgess starting to come in with the fact that our common law has been corrupted with statute law. And I'll leave other people to talk about maritime law or whatever it is, but the key bit is common law is the bit that protects us. And that is the bit that's being stripped out. What else does this guy do? Well, he's a QC himself, and I believe he's great friends with British American Tobacco. So you smokers ought to be on his case, because this man is deceitful. But he's got a very, very high opinion of himself. So if we look at the boys a bit more, here he is, this Cabbage Patch Kid. Yeah? He set up Common Purpose International in India recently. So he was over in Bangalore, and the next minute there's a major Common Purpose event, and I'll bring you back with saying that Common Purpose is socialist connected to New Labour. There is no difference. And then this is Tweedledee and Tweedledum. So we've got Cleggie here, who is not only not British, he openly admits that he's about 25% British, but he wasn't even elected. And the Tories are now saying that if there was another election and the Conservatives were elected, this man stays. Well, who said that? This is a dictatorship, and we've got to bring this dictatorship down, because these boys are dangerous. Here's another traitor, gave the country away to the EU. And Tony Blair. There was a picture of Sherry in the Express, the Daily Mail today. I can't remember, it's Little John's page, I think, was it? Anyway, I recommend you see the picture, because she's suffering a little bit, looking a little bit worse for wear. But this man took us into illegal wars, didn't he? Where we've murdered millions of people, some of them our own soldiers and the rest of them Muslims. And if you think I'm being overtly protective of the Muslims, I'm just telling you the truth.
And innocent children.
And innocent children. He's a war criminal, I believe, and he's still out on the streets. So we need to do something about this man, but we need to do something about these as well. And this is all going on in the background because we're now teamed up with the French militarily, and that of course is absolute nonsense. You can't run an aircraft carrier with joint nationality. Neither can we depend on the French to defend us. It's nothing personal, it's fact.
But that's deliberate.
Of course it is, because we're creating the European armed forces. But here's Sarkozy calling for a fundamental rethink of capitalism. And what he's talking about is the move to the clampdown towards socialism. And we aren't being told at the moment what's going on in France, but there's been some pretty vicious riots over there, and also the cuts and what's happening with the banks. So the French people are being screwed by Sarkozy as well.
How can we trust the French when they sold the Argentinians ex-Citizen?
Well, we can't really trust the French, but we can be friends with the French if we know them for what they are. And of course they're not all bad, but if we're dealing with the elite, we've got to watch them carefully. Now this is part of the key, isn't it? Because whoever controls the purse strings controls what's going on. So the big lie at the moment is that this country is in debt. And I won't steal it from Mike, because I know he wants to talk a bit. But the estimate is the debt on the nation is between 6 and 7 trillion. That's about £233,000 for every man and woman in the country. So never mind the students leaving it. But it's not real, because the money's been created from the banks out of nothing. So the politicians could have a meeting in Parliament tomorrow and simply cancel all the debt. And who would suffer? The banks. Who cares? I do. Now this was a little little thing which appeared on the internet. Does anybody know what this is?
That's the missile.
It's the missile.
Unidentified missile.
Yeah, off the west coast of the States. It was last week now. But a lot of people, including some film crew in a helicopter, watched a missile come out of the sea and climb into the air. Now the interesting thing about this was, when people said who fired the missile, nobody in America said it was them. The Navy said it wasn't them, the Air Force said it wasn't them, and the American security forces said it wasn't ours. Now if that is true, it means it's somebody else's missile. And the most likely one is Chinese. And that means that the Chinese are now capable of putting nuclear submarines off the American west coast. And that means that the world is getting a very dangerous place, because while America devalues, all of the dollars held by the Chinese are becoming worthless. And they're pretty upset about that, because they sold a lot of goods for that money. Now these are the things not being reported in the paper, and if you have a look on Robert Peston's blog, do you know who Robert Peston is? He's the idiot that talks on the BBC about economic things, and he's also a deep common purpose member, and he's also involved with the Media Standards Trust, which is involved with common purpose and all the big banks. But if you look at Peston, who's got his face made up and looks an idiot, he never tells you about these things, because the idea is to keep everybody dumbed down. But in the background there's some very serious stuff happening. And this is more of the lies and deceits. Here he is, little Cameron, Cabbage Patch, before the election, glad handing it with the troops out in Afghanistan, and then behind their backs he signs away the military. Do you know what the plans for the army are? To be reduced to 40,000 men.
And to join up with the RAF.
That was proposed, but the key bit is to be reduced to 40,000 men, which is valueless, but at the same time for a National Guard of 120,000 men to be created. What do you do with the National Guard? Have you seen what's going on in America? And the FEMA teams. That's what you want, 120,000 people, is to keep us under control. And luckily the military are beginning to wake up to this, and there are more and more military people understanding that they're being shafted. And this is the main bit, poppies. We know for a fact, as do other people, that the poppy fields are alive and well in Afghanistan. We also know that both American and British military have been given orders not to harm the poppy fields. Have you seen the bit in the paper? This is because there's a world shortage in, give me the drug, I don't know. Morphine, sorry, morphine is Okay. So basically we're being conned into believing that this is because we need these drugs. In fact, it's the drugs which are driving the monetary corruption through the City of London. And there are people who've written this in more detail than I'm giving you. What I'm really saying is that my research and what I understand is leading me to say these people are right. The criminals are in the City of London, and they're in power in our government. Child stealing, I'm just going to flag it up again, because in my opinion, if we can't look after our children, we haven't got a future. Alright? The state wants the children. This is why you're seeing the weird stuff going on in schools, why the social services breaking up families. Yeah? It's all to do with the minds of the children. And the thing to watch with schools is the academy schools. This is where they want children to come in. Earlier stage they can get them away from mum, 3.5, and they're going to stay inside the school building with on-site social services, therapists, police, until they're kicked out at 18. This is very dangerous. And when you look at who controls the school, it is big corporate names like British Aerospace. So we are giving our education to international arms. There are a few questions, because liberty originally involved with the paedophile information exchange and the paedophile action for liberty. That's a fact. And these two lovely ladies wrote a letter to defend proposals to allow it to be law, to allow it to be permitted to take pornographic photographs of children. They thought that should be allowed, and they thought the onus should be on the parents of the children to prove that the children suffered harm if those photos were taken. So common sense turned on its head. And why are they doing this? I can't give you all the facts tonight, but we know, and people in the circuit know, the government agenda is to make paedophilia normal. That is coming, because we are starting to see the documentation for it. I'll come to you in a minute, so here we've got politicians in the middle of something very mucky, and they get away because most people don't know what they're really involved in. Well, a bit of what we're fighting for, I'm not too sure now when I see the Remembrance Day ceremony. It's not because I've got respect for the people who fought and died, but because I get the impression it's all razzmatazz, and the politicians are there because they think it's where they should be, not because they believe in it. So I've just become a little bit cynical. What are we going to do? Right, there's a lot we can do, and I'm going to say to you that over 6 months, the difference in people and groups that we're talking to, staggering. So before you could talk to audiences and you felt you weren't getting through. Now when we're giving talks, and Ian Crane is saying it and Ike's saying it, all the people out on the circuit are saying people are waking up. So this is brilliant. So these are some of the organisations that we're running. Lawful Rebellion, not about violence, it's about getting people to rebel. You've had enough. But you're going to do it peacefully and lawfully. The British Constitution Group is highlighting treason. We've got Albert Burgess, who's done brilliant work getting people to report treason in police stations with the documentary evidence. And over 73 reports have been made across the country, and the police are beginning to understand that the evidence is real, and they're beginning to talk to us, the whistleblowers. We've got the UK column, and we've got CP Exposed on Common Purpose. Now this is Lawful Rebellion. It's not an organisation, it's a state of mind. If you've decided you've had enough, you're lawfully rebelling. And we're just seeking to join people together to build confidence, pass information, allow them to act. It's your statement, enough is enough, and you're now working alongside others to restore truth, honesty, morality and kindness. Lawful Rebellion shows others that a powerful movement is growing. If you use the logo and you put it on your truth juice, it just says you're part of the movement. There's no organisation, there's no structure, so there's nothing to infiltrate from the other side. But if you imagine you see a sticker on a lamppost, you're curious, what is it? You then discover the movement. But there's no leaders to be picked off. Sorry, a bit dark, little blue spots. This is an early map of where we've got points of contact, people who want to lead a little Lawful Rebellion cell. These now go across Ireland, and we've got overseas, New Zealand, Australia, Denmark and a few in Iceland. So it's beginning to spread, okay? So you are the people. If you start to do things, you become points of contact. And this is it, really. I don't labour it. I'm happy to talk spiritual things. But just have a think, because I will tell you what we're up against is not men and politics. It's absolute evil. And I've said I'll behave myself, so I'm not going to talk about some of the nasty stuff we know about. But it's absolute evil, and we've lost track of this. In here, you know what's right and wrong, and you know stuff that's happening out there is not only wrong, it's evil, and recognise it. So we've got to reject it. And the people doing it, we've got to identify as the abnormal people. Because what they're trying to do to us is make us think there's something wrong with us, whereas it's them. Expose them, ridicule them. They can't take having the mickey taken out of them. Yeah, so if you've got Mandy Mandelson, write to him as Mandy Mandelson. Cameron, Cabbage Patch. You know, do it. Because these people have got huge egos, and when you take the mickey out of them, they can't stand it. So, laughter and fun is good. And turn the tactics back on them. Yeah.
Did someone in France get in trouble for that? Psychosis or something like that?
In France and Europe, the libel laws can be used against people who challenge public authorities. There's a document which is on my website, I can't think the name of it. It's red and it's got common purpose across the front. And if you read that document, it says they are desperately working, amongst other things, to bring the European libel laws into this country. I can say that Plymouth City Council is rotten. Can't do anything to me because I'm talking about the body. But if I said that in France, I could be done for libel unless I could prove it. And if you're worried about Plymouth City Council, I can prove it. Okay? Use the proper words. Yeah? A lot of people have got shy of saying this is criminal. This is disgraceful, this is evil. Yeah? Instead, people have all got a bit squidgy because we don't like to say that he's a Welshman or an Irishman or a redhead or that person's white and that's black. And that's political correctness, because if you can control somebody's mind by the words, you control them. Now this is an American guy we've come into contact recently called Field McCall. He was an American Air Force pilot. He was one of the first men that found out that the Boeing Aircraft Corporation was putting extra bits in their autopilots so that when the pilot switched on autopilot, somebody in a ground station could take control of the aircraft. They could fly it to other destinations, they could land it. And once the on-board crew had switched to autopilot and somebody had taken ground control, they couldn't switch out. And he started to warn people about this, and he also pointed out that it explained how two planes could be flown into the Twin Towers. He was ridiculed, hounded, sent for psychiatric assessments and a few other things. But he's now got a movement, and he got interested in what we're doing, and he said, could he come and see us? So we had a meeting, and he flew across for a day and a half of talking. And it was phenomenal, because all the stuff we are seeing is over there in America as well. And when you look at the links, it's through the elite. So I just put it in there to show you that it's not just UK, it's other people. We've got to look after the children. We've got to protect the family, because that's the strength. You might not get on all the time, none of us do. But you've got to stick together, because if the state drives a wedge in your family, you've had it. Common sense, you know it's wrong. Don't to common purpose, which is about convincing you that you're not right, they are. So use common sense. And it's numbers. How many people in the room, I don't know, but if this grows, 200, 300, 400, the message spreads. So that's what you guys got to do. And this is the key bit, love one another. Because everything that's happening around us is to generate hate. Divide groups, divide families, divide faiths, divide ethnicity. They aren't celebrating diversity, they're creating division. So we've got to reverse it. And we should remember that evil flourishes where good men do nothing. Now then, there's only one person in the room who surfs, apparently. There's method in the madness. Now this is the solution, and I've done this before, so we'll see whether it works. But there's a pretty powerful wave here, and if you're on the bottom end of it, you're probably going to be hurt, so you need to know what you're dealing with. If you're trained, and you know this is dangerous, you can be a lawful rebellion surfer. So why is the wave dangerous? Well, the wave is made up of people saying everything's got to change. Change. That's what the Conservative motto was for the election. Vote for change. Change is a con trick because it's moving you towards destabilising. Alcohol. Is that a pint? Excellent, well done. That's what we're supposed to do. Nothing wrong with it. What's being pushed out at the moment is that anybody who has 2 glasses of wine is an alcoholic, and we're going to take your children off you. So there's trouble with alcohol, the cheap alcohol, and when you see your first young person drunk in the streets, that's not right. But the cheap alcohol's been provided to cause the trouble. Porn, it's a big problem because they could stop it overnight, but they don't want to stop it because the pornography is part of the route to the trouble with the children. Now, I'm not prudish, and I've been in the Navy for 21 years, and I've seen a few things, some of which I'm not particularly proud of now. Okay? But we've got to be aware that this is being done deliberately. And when you see porn now appearing on the BBC, we need to do something about it, because it's disgraceful, and it's perverting the children. And if they get the children, we lose. Propaganda, constant. You know it in the paper, you know it on the news, you know it on the radio. You've got to challenge it. Rock music. There are many different types of music, but if you look, there's some brilliant videos now exposing really what the nasty stuff is about and what Lady Gaga is about. And when you see it covered in raw meat, this is nothing about a joke. This is to do with ritualistic stuff. And I'm going to suggest to you it's satanic. If anybody wants to argue it with me, I'll talk to them afterwards. Drugs destroying society. Sex, okay, it's fun, but basically it's being now made the norm. So you've got young children, 12, 13, encouraged to think it's okay for them. And you've got Peter Tatchell from Stonewall now pressing for the age of homosexual consent to be lowered to 14. Where are they headed? To make paedophilia normal. Junk food, you know what it does to you? Terror, that's to make us all frightened. Al-Qaeda never believed in it. I believe it is a fabrication to make us frightened. I do not believe Al-Qaeda exists in the form the government is telling us.
Created by the CIA.
Correct. Mental illness. Have you seen the statistics? 1 in 10 of us is mentally ill, 1 in 4 is mentally ill. Most children under the age of 14 are mentally ill. The only people who are mentally ill are the people in government at the moment. We need to tell them. NLP, research it, because if you learn how NLP is done, you can't have it done to you, and you'll understand how dangerous it is. And I promise I haven't used any tonight.
What's it sound to you?
Neuro-linguistic programming. It's a form of hypnosis. If I tell you that when I spoke to a man who was doing it with school children in Leeds, and I said to him, is it safe? And he said, of course it's safe. And I said, well, nothing is completely safe, so what probability would you put on it not being safe? And he said, oh, it's very small. Hypnosis is about 1%. 1 in 100 people has a problem after they've been hypnotised. NLP, I reckon it's about 2%.
Isn't it a form of doublethink, what's used in George Orwell's 1984?
Yeah, because NLP is using grammar and dialogue plus movement to your body. Wash my hands.
It's also subliminal.
It's subliminal, right. But come back to how many people become ill. The man said about 2%. Let's say it's 1%. What happens when you start to give this to 300,000 school children? You are going to start to see school children doing strange things. And if you've forgotten about it, there's now up to 29 suicides in Bridgend amongst young people. There's a reason for it. Now, here's all the drivers. We missed one, global warming. Who's worried about global warming? Yeah. taking the mickey out of it now, great, because it's gone, isn't it? Nobody believes it's a joke. Disease. Don't take any notice of the flu vaccine, or don't have the flu vaccines. These are all created things to get you worried. As my wife said, do you remember severe acute, SARS, do you remember SARS?
Yes.
Well, my wife said to me that SARS was actually rubbish. And I said, why is that? And she said, well, in medical terminology, severe and acute respiratory syndrome, severe and acute is the same thing. So really you should get rid of the severe and you're left with arse. Right, so these are all the drivers for this wave of terror, and this is really what does the final push. Worry, fear, confusion. Other people are confused with what's going on. Then the turmoil starts. That's what we're amongst now. And then we're headed towards revolution, change. And what does revolution give you? It gives you a dictatorship. So all these things we see, all being done to us, are to drive this wave. And if we get under here, we're in the dictatorship. So what we need to do is lawfully rebel on our surfboard, and we're going to head towards the solution. And it's easy. This is what we've got to do. We've got to go to a loving, truthful and lawful society. So we've got to get the bad people out. All of us have got to do that, not just me. We. And what we're going to do? Well, the first thing is we're going to tell the truth. The next time you challenge an official, you go for them. But you use the right words. It's fraud, it's corruption, you're bent. And you'll be amazed at the reaction. They start to crumble. We're going to go and report treason. We can give you the documentation, you can read it for yourself, and you can see that the government has repeatedly committed treason. And we're going to get these people in prison. And some of them know we're coming now, and they're getting a bit worried. Why do you think Tony Blair spends £600,000 a year on personal security? Because he's shit scared of us, that's why. Police and the military are your friends. It's difficult, this one with the police, because they can be so mean, but basically they have been corrupted. And what we've got to do is educate them. So the next time you meet some bobbies, talk to them, tell them what's going on, talk about treason, ask if they know what NLP is, ask if they know they've now got East Germans running their military training academies. True. Talk to them, because if we can convert these people, they become our friends. The military, other people are working on that at the moment, and I can tell you that the army in particular are beginning to wake up very quickly. We're going to expose the bankers. Next time you're in the bank, start talking in a loud voice about the demise of the banks, creating money from nothing. If there's a decent queue, and I've done it myself and it works every time, you will hear a pin drop. And then when I left the bank, two ladies came after me, I like that bit, and they said, our husbands have been talking about this, is it going to happen? And I said, absolutely, get your money out the banks. I'm giving you some advice, get your money out the banks. We're going to go for the MPs. The judges are bent, many of them are perverts, that's why they're in family courts, because they're close to the children. Civil servants, same rule applies. Go and protect the children, I've done that. Run on the banks. If you're running a big banking company and one day 100 people turn up at a local branch and want their money out, what do you think happens? Well, they don't shut the door, but the branch reports up the chain and says, we've got 100 people who want their money. What happens? That spreads like wildfire. So the banks then start saying, what if this is over 100 branches tomorrow? So let's start frightening these people by taking away what they feed on, which is their money. 7th of December. 7th of December. TV licences, I'm just giving you an example, but many people have stopped paying their TV licences because they've had enough of it. We need a lot more, and we need to explain to more people. Stop your council tax. It's unlawful. And another policeman, John Hurst, has been in court up in Wales. He absolutely flattened the 3 magistrates. I don't mean that literally. It's big enough. But basically, he was able to floor them over their legal and knowledge of law. And he actually proved to them that they were breaking the law. They proceeded to break the law by ignoring him. But now it's moving through to appeal. Now these are serious people starting to do this, and at the court, as an example, there were 4 police officers who were very interested in what the group were talking about. So we've got to spread the message. And the last bit is just stop. Yeah? Say you've had enough. So when somebody gives you a questionnaire, as I got one the other day from Plymouth City Council about planning matters, but it asked me for my religion, sex, age, income and a few other things, I wrote a letter back saying the whole thing was offensive and posted it back to the lady who sent it. When you get junk mail, don't put it in the bin because that costs you time and effort. Basically get the envelope, which is the return address, and put it in and repost it, because that gets rid of the junk, and also it sends it back to the main company.
No contract,
you can send a contract back if you want. Okay, so look, this is the key bit. We've got this monster wave coming, right? If you know about it and you understand it, it's a bit scary because it's a big wave, but you can actually enjoy the ride. Okay? I can't give you lessons because I'm not trained to surf, but you can get yourself down to Cornwall and do it. So I'm trying to say that I'm going through some very nasty things, but we can stop this. And all that's got to happen is you grow this group and we start doing these actions. And there are many other actions which John Harris or Albert or John Hurst or Ian Crane or Ike or any of the other people are talking about, but we do it. Thank you very much. Anybody's got any questions? And also I'd like to just give Mike a little introduction, because I would like him to say a few words on the banking system in the country, because I think you'll find it interesting. So, questions? Sir?
You mentioned a lot of things about Muslims, the word Muslim, sorry. He refers to Muslims quite a lot. What people don't understand is nobody's ever translated that word into English. The word Muslim, if you translate it into English, so if ever you hear the word Muslim,
it's Musulman.
If ever you hear the word Muslim, what it means is somebody that submits to God's will, which is peace and love. And if ever you hear the word Islam, the actual translation of the word Islam means peace. So it's not a religion of fanatics, they believe it's a way of life of peace. But for neuro-linguistic purposes, nobody ever translates that word into English. So you always hear the word Muslims, or Islam, or the Islamic mosque. It should be the peaceful community centre. So they're not translating the words on purpose. Getting back to the United Kingdom. So and if they're not submitting to God's will, they're not Muslim. It means they're a peaceful person. And if they're not acting as a peaceful person, they're not, So the word Islam is actually a translation of the word peace.
Just one word on this. There are about 3.5 million Muslims in this country. Personally, I would rather have those 3.5 million Muslims fighting with us. Yes, because pardon?
We don't think this mic camera can back.
Say again.
I've seen a spy camera campaign. The whole community got together in Birmingham and threw out a load of impressive CCTV and HDR.
Well, is that on the internet somewhere?
We'll have the link up on the site soon.
If somebody points me to it, we'll do a little bit in the paper for you, because we're doing one.
Kept the community together around here. It's not as normally is.
Okay, brilliant.
Didn't Harriet Harman earlier in her career take the courts on rights for paedophiles? She actually went to court.
I believe she did, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know the MEP Nigel Farage? Sometimes I see him like on the internet, like giving the wrong way a real good bashing. Is that a pony donkey show for real?
Well, this is a very interesting question, because I had to declare my hand last Saturday. 6 years ago, I was going to say, when I was discovering how bad things were in the early days, I started to have a look at UKIP as a party that could do something. What I discovered is a lot of very good people, but they had no idea of what was really happening to them. And everything was focused on Europe. And eventually I decided that the best way to deal with this is to stay away from political parties, because then you've got no label. And if you go and give talks and you don't have a label, I don't mind if you're a Conservative or Lib Dem or Green or whatever. But the person who has consistently refused to look at any evidence that I've put forward, and I've come to the conclusion that Nigel Farage can't read, is out of the hundreds and thousands of documents that we're putting forward showing what is actually happening in this country, he still considers it conspiracy theory. I believe Nigel Farage's job is to make sure that UKIP never flourishes, and therefore it's a honey trap. So people can be in the Conservative Party and they say, if it gets really bad, I'll join UKIP. But his job is to make sure that UKIP never actually achieves anything. And I haven't said this on the film before, but seeing him re-elected, to me it's obvious that that's the objective. So I am highly suspicious of him. He can speak well, he can be...
Crash recently?
Pardon?
What about the fact he was in a plane crash recently?
Well, yeah, I mean...
a very favoured way of getting political leaders, especially named Kennedy.
Well, maybe, in that case he's a rogue, and the agenda he's running is his own. But I can tell you that there are other people in UKIP who not only pass us information, but take information from us. So we're talking about Nigel Farage, we're not talking about the whole of UKIP.
You want to PD join them?
So,
I don't fancy my son spending the first part of his life being brainwashed. Where do we stand on not sending our children to school?
well, you've still got the opportunity to home educate, but if you do... Pardon? Okay, I didn't know that, but what I was going to say is that if you home educate at the moment, you need to be particularly careful, because social services are starting to target parents who are home educating. And the reason for that is that the state doesn't want children home educated. And my solution to this is to get more people to home educate, because then it starts to spread. But if you're not going to home educate, get into school and look at the actual material that they're using to teach the children. Go and look at the books they're reading, look at the pamphlets, the exercises, and I think you may be surprised at some of the stuff you see. Yes?
My little one, they stopped doing the nativity this year, they're learning it weeks, and they stopped taking pictures at school with the camera of the children. And all the actual joy of Christmas has gone out of the school.
Yeah, but this is brainwashing, because what you're doing is you're breaking down normal fun. Yeah, if you tell them,
I can't really do anything with the school to say we want a nativity play back, and what can we actually do?
You've got to get amongst the other parents and talk about what you know.
Yeah, the schools are proud of offending people's religions, aren't they?
Yeah, but this is political correctness. This is Marxism. You've got to steamroller through it. In a local school...
Pig in there, farm secretaries offending people. Who's offending a pig?
Yeah.
A local school to me, it's primary school, there's never ever been any trouble, no bullying. They don't have problems. It's a small school, it's been fine. I go to visit one day, I walk in through the door and I'm faced with a big poster which is talking about bullying in schools. If somebody bullies you, this is what to do. So I asked one of the teachers basically why the poster was there. And they said, oh, well, we have to have that. And I then said, basically, you now have bullying, because every child that comes into the school is reading there's bullying and new parents. This is political correctness, is applied Marxism. Roll through it and tell people that's what it is.
It's spreading bullying, not love and friendship.
It does the opposite to what you want it to do. Sorry, Vicky, I'll come to that.
I was curious about, because I saw you back in February when you predicted the Hung government, and I was just wondering why the Hung government, why it's come about, and because it's not just our country that's had a Hung government, it's New Zealand and Australia as well.
Because if you're creating dictatorships, you've got to get rid of the party system. So what do? You drive it towards a point where nobody's got overall control. We've got a coalition now with Cleggy Bailey, yeah? And if there was another election, and who's interested in voting for these idiots? So if there's another election, I'll be surprised if there is, but if there is another one, and it's again a hung vote, then well, we might as well all work together. And you'll have Labour, Conservatives and Lib Dems in one group. And once they're in, that's it. The door's shut. So the system is being engineered to turn people off politics so you don't vote.
Because they were really rare previously, weren't they?
Absolutely.
And all of a sudden we've had three.
Yeah.
All of one.
It's a fix. And I tell you, I stood as an MP candidate in Plymouth just for the sheer what's it of it to see what would happen. And I stood at the count and I watched vote rigging. And when I brought it to the attention of the returning officer, he became unbelievably aggressive and I'll call the police and have you thrown out. That was the reaction, and I'm not surprised. It was going on right the way across the country.
Stalin once said, it's not about who you vote for that counts.
Who counts? Who counts the votes?
Who counts the votes?
Stalin.
I challenged my head a couple of years ago about this HPV vaccine, that it causes more cancer than what it's supposed to.
Yeah.
And she said, well, we don't offer it, and one of the girls gets cancer. She says, then I can be had up in court.
Yeah, to which you say you'll also be had up in court if one of the girls becomes paralysed, as several of them did.
Yeah.
So it's really get back to the doctors and give them the information. Most of the doctors type in their computer screens now, they don't even know what the drugs are they're giving you. So give the doctors the information.
Well, when my dad was in hospital, I said you can't expect the GPs to know what every drug is. You have a responsibility as a doctor in the hospital to tell the GP what it is that you are giving him.
Yeah.
I said,
we are seeing the medical system now being corrupted. And I can tell you for a fact, the whistleblowers that are talking to us now, which includes consultants, doctors, who gives the drugs out? Pharmacists, right, are telling us that they are now seeing people disposed of in hospital. This has come across time after time. Old people, vulnerable people are being dispatched. It's a euthanasia program.
Ian Crane said on his talk, he said that in America, his mother-in-law was really ill with cancer, and they renewed it because she was covered for it on the insurance. So 6 weeks before she died, they give her a hip operation to replace the hip because it's all paid for on the insurance.
Yeah. Yes, well, that's what I feel here. I'm not at this stage of the evening going to go more into that. But the brilliant thing, let's deal with the positive, is the people who are coming out of the woodwork and blowing the whistle. Military people, police,
people in hospitals. They've even now got some psychiatrists who are starting to come forward and talk about what they know is going on. And this is absolutely brilliant.
Isn't it true to say that they're not actually said either, even if they want to come forward, like in their own cell phones?
Well, whistleblowing is a dangerous business. I mean, if you like, where I started in Plymouth, trying to tell people I was seeing massive amounts of public money being misappropriated, and that's when I started to get the threats.
How are you protecting yourself?
I think somebody looks after me at the moment. But the other thing is that basically, as you get a bit more confidence and you get out and you start to be known and you have people around you and you work in groups, you find these people run away from you.
And what if you're not lucky enough to have someone to protect you?
Well, I'd say the basic thing is, if you're going to fight on your own, which some people do, you just do enough that you feel comfortable with it. If you're really going to take on the establishment, it's better to do it with a group. Yeah?
You just want to protect the engine and catch it.
I've been talking about it, yeah.
You first, Ronald.
But you can laugh about this subject, but I will little challenge to you guys that if you start to get out there doing things, I think you will find some amazing things will happen in your lives. Because this is about some fundamental issues, and it's to do with stuff that is a lot more than men in politics.
One of the links up personal accounts, because I've got a lot, I didn't put quite a lot.
This lady in
Okay. I'm your friendly local anti-fluoridation expert.
Welcome!
Okay, well, I do that. I've had a talk with Nick and hopefully we can look up something. I'm concerned very much about the way in which our children are becoming older, younger. For example, little girls wear makeup at 8 or 9. Some of them start puberty at 9 years or 10 years or 11 as we used to. And that is down, I believe, to the way in which the fluoride in our water supply changes our metabolism. It actually affects our the production of melatonin, which brings forward puberty. In other words, it disrupts the melatonin, it doesn't actually get as much in, and now the children come to puberty earlier. And this is why we have such a problem, I think, with youngsters, very young girls, wanting to go out on, play with their friends on the streets in the evening, and want to hang around with boys up to age 10 or even 9. And so some children can get pregnant even earlier than they have any business doing.
Well, two things I'd like to say is, one, you must be a prime candidate for a talk or another event, because this is the way to do it. I've done my subject, you've got a completely different subject. Do I agree with what you're talking about? Yes. But the other thing is, we are seeing, and you can follow it through to United Nations policy on the children, is the aim is to sexualise children as early as possible. Yeah? You can just see this stuff coming through.
On the point of fluoridization, I was suggesting it for my children.
Yeah.
And I was requesting them. He has a 13-year-old son. I was talking about fluoride and toothpaste and whiskers. And it hardens the pineal gland or something.
It calcifies the pineal gland.
I also says, why is it that the mercury that they put in nuclear bombs that put in my teeth? Because 54% mercury in the mouth is good.
Yeah, that's
I want my child to have white films. Interesting, what he spoke out straight away, he says, I have to tour the party later. It sounds very communist to me. I have got no choice, he said, but this is a National Health Centre. It is my job and I do not get supplied with anything else other than to put amalgam films in the mouth of
the children. Do you have to pay for white films?
He wouldn't, I said, I'll pay for white films. He said, it's a National Health Centre, I cannot do it. You have to go private to get that too.
I've got something to say on that though, because those white things, they just come out like nothing on earth. Once you chew the teeth, they've just gone.
Because our teeth are changed, because we've got fluoride in our teeth,
and
it makes them crumbly and makes them
break away, because I have those teeth.
What about silver? That's why you everybody's come together. I just want to give the microphone to Mike for whatever he wants, but I'm looking at the clock as well. There's stuff going on with banks and money which I think you need to know about.
Before I get on the banks, I just want to say something about referendums. A lot of emails going about at the moment about referendums. I don't know how much you know about the British Constitution, but our constitutional settlement is basically based on common law contract between the people and the crown, right? And what the government has been doing over many years now has been attempting to subvert our constitution through statute law, and it's what they're doing is okay. So what they're doing is unlawful, and what they're attempting to do by running referendums, two things. First of all, they're attempting to give the unlawful activities credibility by getting the people who are party to the common law constitution to make the changes that they require. But the other thing that they're attempting to do through referendum is to pull an Irish stunt on us and you know, they control both sides of the argument, or they have as many referenda as they need to get the right answer. So I just want, whenever you see emails from people about direct democracy and referendums, just have to think about that and what the implications of referendum might be for us, because I think it's something we don't want to support. But Brad wanted me to say something about the banking system, and he said earlier on that we have well, the Taxpayers Alliance reckons now that I had put a figure of 6 trillion, they reckon it's £7.5 trillion worth in this country now. But what I would say about that is that it's a fiction. It's not real, because the money isn't real. Only 3% of the money in circulation is real currency, in terms of pound notes or coins. The rest of it isn't really pound sterling. It's this parallel currency that the banks create when they create a loan. Since 97% of the currency in circulation has been created through debt, and it hasn't been created by the country, it's been created by commercial banks. When they created debt plus the interest repayments, plus the majority of the debt actually that exists in the banking system and in the commercial world is based on the global casino of the markets. So the bond markets, the stock markets, the commodities markets, hedge funds and investment banks have been betting on what's been going on in the real world. And they've been creating more and more what they call sophisticated products, financial products. A product is if it's manufactured, it's not a real thing. It's something that a PhD student from Cambridge has created, and they call them derivatives. So you have a real physical product, and then you make a bet on that, on the availability of that physical product and what the price of that physical product might be. So they have many levels of abstraction from reality, and make bets on what might happen in the real world. Whereas in the past, investment banks and hedge funds may have bet on futures contracts, for example, which is a form of derivative based on future production of farm product or oil or gas or any other kind of raw material. And they would bet make a bet on a futures contract. At the end of the day was they would not be left holding that contract when it matured, because once the contract matures, they've got to take physical delivery of the goods. And so obviously a hedge fund who's based in Mayfair or somewhere like that isn't capable of taking 1,000 barrels of oil. So they don't want the 1,000 barrels of oil. They just want to make bets on the futures contract while it's up to the point it matures. But a new feature of the markets is a new product called a product-backed exchange-traded fund, where they create a fund which speculates on the futures market, but it's based on taking delivery of the physical product. So what this allows the banks, the investment banks and the hedge funds to do is to control the flows of physical product, and this might mean food, wheat, corn, might mean oil, might mean gas. It means that they can hold up that product in a warehouse, thereby driving up demand for it, or at least reducing the supply of the product, driving up the price, while at the same time they're speculating on the futures markets, right? So they get it both ways, and they're attempting to push, but they are being quite successful pushing up the price of staple products, right? What they're actually doing, I would argue, is starvation for profit, because the usual trouble spots around the world, third world countries, Africa, whatnot, are going to suffer as a direct result. And we've got a situation at the moment where crops have failed this year in many parts of the world. Russia, many Eastern European countries have put export embargoes on staple products.